Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Soul Shift Messages. If you found your way here, trust there's something in this message for you. Understand this space is about growth, truth, and transformation. We don't bypass here, we don't sugarcoat, and not every message will feel comfortable, but it will be honest. I speak in flow, and sometimes that includes cussing. It's just part of how the messages come through. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and trust your own discernment above all else. Take a deep breath, and let's begin. If you are new here, please know at this time I create weekly content in 3 parts. Part 1 focuses on what needs to be revealed. Part 2 focuses on what needs to be understood. And Part 3 focuses on what needs to be done. What action do we need to take to embody whatever we happen to be discussing for that week? Based on when you see this video, you'll find all available links to content in the series in the description box below. If for any reason the links aren't available yet, just know they're on their way. So I say all of that to say this is going to be part 1 for this week's series, and the topic is shame. I'm calling this message, Shame is a System, Not Just a Feeling. Let's dive right in. Shame is far more than the feeling that you have done something wrong. At its deepest level, it is a survival system that develops when a person begins to believe that they themselves are the problem. Its central fear is not failure. Its central fear is losing belonging. The deepest belief beneath shame is, if people truly know me, I will be rejected, abandoned, humiliated, or unloved. Everything that shame builds grows from this single belief. How shame begins. Shame rarely appears all at once. It usually develops slowly through repeated emotional experiences. These experiences may include criticism, rejection, humiliation, neglect, betrayal, emotional inconsistency, being misunderstood, conditional love, impossible expectations, punishment for expressing authentic emotions or needs. Often, no single event alone creates shame. Instead, hundreds or thousands of small emotional injuries accumulate until they become an invisible worldview. Eventually, the person no longer thinks bad things happen to me. Instead, they conclude there must be something wrong with me. Over time, this conclusion becomes so familiar that it feels like objective reality rather than a learned belief. And babies, they want me to remind you, just because you learned something doesn't mean you need to keep it. You can update that with a new learned belief that is more in alignment with your reality. Okay? Give me 1 second, babies. The lighting is changing in the house, and I just can't be out here looking like a disco ball / an oil slick. I ain't oily. It's the lighting. All right, here we go. Shame exists before words. Let me grab some water. So again, shame exists before words. Some of you may recognize this as pre-verbal and that would be accurate. If you don't know what pre-verbal means, give me a minute. I'll talk about it briefly, but you'll get the idea. Shame often forms before people have language to understand it. Pre-verbal. It becomes an emotional atmosphere rather than a conscious memory. Someone may grow up with an ongoing sense of defectiveness without being able to identify where it came from. This is why logical reassurance often fails. The belief exists beneath conscious thought. And babies, they're just saying shame runs deep. It runs deep. And that is part of the reason why I have to put this series together. We'll go into that more later on. Shame is an attempt to stay safe. Shame is not inherently malicious. Originally, it's protective. It develops because vulnerability once felt dangerous. It teaches rules such as hide your needs, do not ask for too much, stay small, do not attract attention, do not make mistakes, anticipate rejection before it happens, become whatever others need. These strategies may once have reduced emotional pain. The tragedy is that they continue operating long after circumstances have changed. What once protected survival begins preventing genuine living. Shame is built around belonging. The entire structure of shame revolves around one question: how do I avoid losing connection? It teaches that belonging must be earned rather than received. Instead of believing I am loved, therefore I can grow, the internal belief becomes I must become good enough before I deserve love. Life becomes an endless qualification process. Acceptance is always one achievement away. And babies, you don't need to earn love. They're making that very clear. You are deserving of love just as you are. You don't need to earn it. And I'm hearing if anyone ever made you feel or think you needed to earn love, they're saying that's a lie. And they're saying you don't need to carry the weight of that person's opinion. You can put that down. That's their belief. You don't have to keep carrying that. You can put that down. That's significant for someone. Shame creates an impossible contract. Shame silently promises if you become perfect enough, productive enough, attractive enough, intelligent enough, selfless enough, successful enough, careful enough, then you will finally be safe. But this contract can never be completed. Every success simply creates another requirement. Safety never arrives. Why? because it's conditional. Every success simply creates another requirement. Shame changes reality. Once shame becomes established, it changes perception itself. Reality becomes filtered through self-condemnation. Neutral situations feel threatening. Kindness feels suspicious. Praise feels temporary. Failure feels permanent. The mind begins searching for evidence that confirms defectiveness. Meanwhile, it ignores or dismisses evidence that contradicts it. Acceptance becomes luck. Success becomes coincidence. Love becomes temporary. Criticism becomes absolute truth. Shame functions like an investigator that only collects evidence supporting its own conclusion. It is a system. This is how it functions. This is why we need to interrupt this system and update it. Because babies, this serves no one's greatest and highest good. How do we reach our fullest potential with this running? All right, and this isn't about shame, blame, or judgment. I don't do that. I'm not for it. This is really about raising awareness so that we can decide, once we know this is running, what do we want to do about it? All right? And this series is going to walk us through how to actually update this system if you want to take it that far. You don't have to. Shame distorts time. Old emotional experiences become attached to present situations. A person may intellectually know they are safe. Emotionally, they react as though they are still living inside old experiences. Past and present become emotionally merged. This is why reactions often seem much larger than current circumstances alone would explain. Babies, this is how you can see grown adults essentially throw what you would consider a childlike tantrum or a childlike reaction. They're saying that is actually accurate. What often happens is, when some of you may know this as a trigger, but you don't have to use that word if you don't want to. But basically, when someone experiences something in the present, it can spark or evoke an emotional reaction that's actually tied to something that maybe happened to them as a child or takes them back to their childhood. That's why they're having that emotional reaction, and why that emotional reaction can be far larger than the actual event may seem to warrant, right? They seem disproportional. And they want you to understand this isn't to excuse, right? Especially if someone's reaction causes harm of some sort. But they just want you to understand. It's important for someone to understand that's actually what's happening. Is somebody, whether they realize it or not, they are physically in that present moment, but emotionally they went back. They went all the way back to what is their original wound and that response. Okay? That is significant for someone. And it doesn't mean you are responsible for how they respond or the fact that they have that wound. Again, that's not yours to carry. But I just feel like I may have helped someone connect some dots. All right? We're all responsible for our wounds. And they want you to pay attention when people are having those types of reactions, because they're saying that's important information for you to have so that you can make an informed based decision. All right, because I just feel like some of you are going to start realizing that people have wounds that they have no intention of addressing. And that's going to be important information for you. Okay? Shame creates false identities. One of shame's greatest tricks is convincing people that survival adaptations are their personality. Examples include, I am quiet, when it originally meant it became unsafe to speak. I am independent, when it originally meant no one came when I needed help. I don't need affection, when it originally meant needing affection hurt too much. I am a perfectionist, when it originally meant mistakes once felt dangerous. Many identities are actually historical records. And babies, if you've been with me for a little bit, we've been talking about really detaching from things that keep us in rigid identities and being willing to release them. They're saying this is why. They are actually, in many cases, historical records. And when you are watching this, I want you to trust this message is for you. But when I'm recording this, we are absolutely in a time where old identities are being asked to be let go of, so that healthier ones, more authentic ones can actually come through. This is a time to be flexible. You are not what you went through. You are not. I'm hearing what you needed to become to survive those experiences. I feel like someone really needs to hear that. I'm hearing you did what you needed to do in the moment, and it's okay to recognize you are no longer in that survival scenario. You can put that identity down if you want to. Let's keep it moving. Shame splits the self. Shame creates internal conflict. Different parts of the personality begin working against one another. One part wants intimacy. Another part fears being known. One seeks success. Another believes success is undeserved. One wants rest. Another calls rest laziness. One longs for joy. Another insists joy must first be earned. The result is constant exhaustion. Much of the struggle comes not from life itself, but from these competing internal voices. Why? Because it splits the self, babies. It creates fragmentation. It's separation, right? You have two things on the same side of, well, on different sides of a system. So it's got one foundation and it's at two different sides, right? Rest, laziness. All right. Some of you may recognize these as binaries, right? This or that. All right. Some of you may recognize this as polarities. All right. We got a lot of words for a lot of things. But again, it splits the self, which creates this internal tension that, if left unaddressed, will just keep creating constant exhaustion, because it's just trying to constantly balance out all these competing voices. All right, let's get back to it. Shame creates extremes. Again, those opposites of the same system. Balance becomes difficult. Everything moves toward extremes. Someone may alternate between isolation and attention seeking, perfectionism and self-neglect, people pleasing and anger, emotional numbness and overwhelming emotion, grandiosity and worthlessness, rigid control and impulsive escape. These are not opposite problems. They are different attempts to solve the same underlying fear. Again, these are systems, and you've got the extremes. And really the goal is to get to a point where you stop swinging back and forth in between these extremes and you try to balance them out. But shame makes that very difficult to do. There is a reason why I was called to put this series together, because I feel like some of you are trying to balance out the polarities or the opposites, the extremes, however you want to put it. But tackling shame, updating the system of shame will help you with that. Shame becomes an entire psychological system. Fear protects shame. Anger protects vulnerability. Hopelessness prevents disappointment. Isolation prevents rejection. Perfectionism prevents criticism. Addiction numbs emotional pain. Self-sacrifice attempts to earn acceptance. Hyperachievement attempts to prove worth. Withdrawal attempts to avoid exposure. Each behavior serves the same system. It is an entire psychological system. Hypervigilance feels like wisdom. Shame teaches constant monitoring. People begin scanning for criticism, rejection, abandonment, hidden motives, failure, embarrassment. This feels like intelligence. In reality, it is the nervous system trying to prevent future pain. Say it again. This feels like intelligence. In reality, it is the nervous system trying to prevent future pain. It is intended to be protective. All right? I feel like someone is beating themselves up over this and they're saying that's not necessary. And they don't want you to do that. You have a malfunctioning system that, frankly, a lot of us do. And we can update that. All right? We can teach it something new. It can learn a new behavior. This is about awareness. Okay? When we are aware of things, we can make different decisions. Okay? Please be kind to yourself, right? Because even I am still working through shame on my end too. In a lot of ways, we are all just walking each other home, okay? I'm also hearing give yourself credit being here and listening to this video, because I'm hearing that's already a big step in the right direction. And again, it allows you to make a choice. All right, let me get back to it. Shame confuses visibility with danger. Being seen begins to feel unsafe. Being understood feels risky. Receiving appreciation feels temporary. Authentic connection feels dangerous because it increases the possibility of rejection. As a result, people often become known for the version of themselves designed to survive rather than the version that genuinely exists. And babies, they're just saying it's a choice. All right? Authentic connection may feel dangerous, but they're saying if you already know the worst thing that can happen is being rejected, they do genuinely want you to think about what is the actual worst that could happen, right? And they're saying, who hasn't been rejected at some point in this experience? Some of you really need to ask if you really think you can go your entire life performing, being someone who you actually are not, the person you had to be to survive, to be loved, or to take the risk, right? Because life always carries risk, but to take the risk of being who you genuinely are and risking rejection, right? You can be rejected for not being who you are. Some of you need to think about what the pros and cons are and what you honestly think you would find fulfilling in this lifetime. I'm hearing some of you are in relationships where you recognize now that you're performing and you're really struggling with that. And I'm hearing you're meant to sit with that and really think about that. Okay? Shame creates two lives. Externally, someone may appear capable, successful, kind, responsible, productive. Internally, they may feel lonely, afraid, fraudulent, critical, emotionally exhausted. The greater the difference between these two lives, the greater the loneliness. Why? Because it splits the self. You have one life where you are performing, and you have the internal life where they're really saying that's where your genuine self is. Because you have this separation, because you have this split, the further that is, the greater the loneliness. And I'm hearing some of you are feeling the weight of that loneliness. Why? Because others know the performance. Very few know the person. And I'm hearing some of you are feeling the weight of that. And that's why you're being asked to really sit with that. Because babies, they're saying the people who are really meant to align with you and be in your life would love the authentic version of you. They would love you just as you are. Okay? Something to think about. Shame changes love. Love gradually becomes associated with performance. Affection must be earned. Worth must be demonstrated. Failure appears to cancel belonging. Instead of resting within relationships, people begin working inside them. And babies, I'm hearing relationships should feel like safe harbors, right? There should be, it should feel like a safe place to come home to at the end of a long day. They want me to leave that there, so I'm going to do that. All right. Shame resists receiving. Giving often feels safer than receiving. Receiving love, help, compliments, forgiveness, care, support, and rest. All right? They all create vulnerability. Receiving means trusting that something good might continue. Shame struggles to tolerate this uncertainty. And babies, how can you welcome in the new beautiful things if you're not open to receiving? Okay? Shame can wear many disguises. Shame rarely announces itself directly. It often appears as perfectionism, constant self-improvement, people-pleasing, workaholism, intellectualization, self-criticism, emotional distance, cynicism, anger, control, humility, independence. These behaviors are not always unhealthy, but they can become ways of avoiding the deeper fear of being fully seen. Babies, I'm just hearing it's time to show the world the real you. You don't have to do it all at once, and you don't have to show it to everyone. But some of you are gonna have, they're putting it as safe people. Some of you are gonna have safe people coming into your experience. And they're really encouraging you to be open to receiving these people, but also be open to actually sharing who you genuinely are with these people. All right? Genuine connection. All right. Intelligence can become a defense. Someone may understand themselves extremely well intellectually. They may explain every emotional pattern with remarkable accuracy, yet remain emotionally unreachable. Knowledge becomes another form of protection. Insight alone does not dissolve change. Babies, that's why I have 3 parts to this content, because the first 2 focus on insight, right? We need to understand at a higher level what's going on. We need to understand the underlying mechanisms of what we're dealing with. But I didn't always have a part 3 to my topics. And I was told that, I really needed to put a process in place to actually help people move through these energies, right? Actually take action. Why? Because insight alone does not dissolve change. But I also created 3 parts so that you could handle things at your pace. You could dive as deep as you wanted to and take it as far as you want to when you feel ready. Okay? But someone needs to hear that. Knowledge can become another form of protection if you do not move from insight to action. Nothing changes. You just have knowledge. And all right, I'm going to leave that there. Shame mimics morality. One of the deepest deceptions is that shame convinces people that relentless self-criticism is honesty. It says, I'm just being realistic. I'm staying humble. I'm holding myself accountable. But endless self-condemnation is not accountability. It is a learned strategy for rejecting yourself before anyone else has the chance. Again, babies, part of adjusting shame will allow you to treat yourself kinder. And they really want us to be kind to ourselves. Some of us have been through some very tough experiences. And they're saying they want us to become our own best friends, really love on ourselves. Okay? If you're not pouring back into yourself at this time, they want you to make that a priority, even if it's something small. Do something intentionally for you and only you. Okay? Healthy remorse is different. There is an important distinction. Healthy remorse says, I did something harmful. Shame says, I am harmful. Healthy remorse encourages repair. Shame destroys identity. It separates the self. One leads toward growth. The other leads toward hopelessness. Shame likes certainty. Even painful certainty can feel safer than hopeful uncertainty. Believing I know I'm worthless may feel emotionally safer than risking the possibility that worth could be real but uncertain. This is why people sometimes reject opportunities, intimacy, or success. Familiar suffering feels predictable. Hope requires openness. And babies, some of you wonder why some people stick with things they are unhappy with, they're not fulfilled with. And they're saying this is why. I'm just hearing I'm hearing the phrase, the devil you know. Some people do want to stick with the devil they know, what they already know they have, than to actually step into something uncertain. Okay? Fear and shame can really hold people in place. All right? It requires a level of openness to be able to move into uncertainty and to embrace it. I'm also hearing and hold it and hold it. Interesting. So let me keep it moving. But some of you are like, they're so miserable. Why do they stay? For some of them, that is the reason. It's what they know. They'd rather deal with what they know than to shift to something that they don't know, is unfamiliar to them. So, and some of you, if you know you're really unhappy, they want me to pose the question to you of, honestly, how much worse do you think it can get if you move into uncertainty? Because they're saying, like, could it be worse? Sure. But they want you to actually challenge, like, what's the likelihood, right? Especially if you do identify as, like, genuinely being miserable, right? They're like, for some of you, like, how could it actually get worse? How could it get worse than what it is? Again, weigh your pros and cons and make your decisions, okay? Shame shrinks life. Eventually, shame changes the questions people ask. Instead of, what kind of life do I want? They ask, what can I survive? Instead of, what excites me? They ask, what is least likely to fail? Instead of, who am I becoming? They ask, how do I avoid making mistakes? Life becomes organized around avoiding pain rather than pursuing meaning. And again, they're saying it's a choice. Do you want to live your life trying to avoid pain, or do you want to pursue meaning? Because they're saying it's very difficult to balance out both of those and to be fulfilled. Shame narrows imagination. Creativity becomes catastrophe planning. Curiosity becomes caution. Play becomes productivity. Experimentation becomes risk. Many gifts remain hidden because imperfection feels too dangerous. And babies, let's be honest for a second, right? We're all imperfect people walking around, right? And I think it's just important that we acknowledge that, right? Like there is not a single perfect person walking around, right? Even if people look like they're living the perfect life, I assure you there is something that's not going right for them, right? There is something they're struggling with, right? There really are a lot of people who perform, and it's not to say they're bad people for that, but some people really are good at putting on a good show. Okay? Imperfection may feel too dangerous, but they're saying perfectionism is never going to actually happen. It's not. Okay? Again, weigh the pros and cons and make your decisions. Anger often protects shame. Sometimes anger develops because helplessness becomes unbearable. Instead of feeling exposed, the person becomes hard. They armor up. The target may become themselves, other people, institutions, or the world. Beneath the anger often remains the original vulnerability. Shame spreads. People carrying unresolved shame often pass it to others unintentionally, not because they want to hurt other people, because they never learned another way. And babies, they're saying this series is your invitation to learn another way if you want it. This may happen through constant criticism, conditional approval, emotional withdrawal, impossible standards, fear of vulnerability, perfectionistic expectations. These emotional patterns can move across generations even when the original cause is forgotten. This is why it's important for me to create this series to interrupt this system, because it does spread whether you mean to or not. And I'm hearing it can stop with you if you are interested in that. They're saying everything is choices. Beneath shame is grief. When shame begins to soften, grief often appears. People mourn the childhood they did not receive, the love they needed, the years spent hiding, relationships that never became safe, opportunities never pursued, part of themselves they abandoned in order to survive. This grief is not failure. It is evidence that emotional numbness is giving way to feeling. Babies, if you feel these emotions are coming up, they're saying let them go. Let them do what they need to do. Let them flow. Because again, this is your body trying to move energy out. You're trying to create space. And it's important to do so. So if it's coming out, they are encouraging you to let that process, let it fully process. I'm going to leave that there. Compassion means seeing the whole person. Compassion is not pretending everything is fine, nor is it avoiding responsibility. It means seeing everything at once, strengths and weaknesses, pain and possibility, history and choice, mistakes and dignity. Compassion refuses to reduce a person to either their successes or their failures. And babies, they're saying start with yourself. Apply this to yourself. If you're gonna start with having compassion toward anyone, start with yourself. I'm hearing you deserve that, and you know you deserve that. They're saying when it comes to other people, they want you to use discernment, right? We can have compassion. We can see the whole person. We can understand what people have been through, why they act the way they do, and still sometimes for some of us have had to make hard choices around, you know what, this is not actually healthy for me and I need to take space, or I need to continue on my journey without this person. And they are saying that is fine. All right. Use your discernment when it comes to other people. You can have compassion and still choose what is in alignment with your greatest and highest good. Okay. I'll leave that there. Accurate perception matters more than positive thinking. Healing does not require pretending life is wonderful. It requires seeing reality clearly, not exaggerating strengths, not exaggerating flaws, seeing both. Accuracy is more transformative than either praise or criticism. All right? Again, looking at things holistically. The healthy self remains. The deepest hopeful message is that shame never completely destroys the authentic self. It is not lost. It is not gone, babies. Someone needs to hear that. Underneath all protective strategies remain curiosity, kindness, creativity, humor, wonder, generosity, love, courage. These qualities have been covered over. They have not disappeared. Healing is often less about creating a new self than uncovering the one that has always existed beneath fear. And babies, I've been doing my makeup more because this is a part of me that has existed before. I went through some hard times. This is an aspect of me that frankly at one point was too much for me to continue, and I had to put that down. But I've gotten to a point where I really want to do that again. I've always loved playing with my makeup and my looks and, all that type of stuff. I have a bunch of different shades of lipstick that over time y'all are going to get to see. And I've got different blushes, different eyeshadows. Like I'm starting small and I'm trying to be consistent now, but I feel like someone needs to hear that so they understand like these things can come back. It was never lost. It was just buried under a bunch of shit that I had to work through. And it's coming back and I'm very excited. All right. And I know it's a small thing, but it's very meaningful to me. This was something that I really loved, was a huge part of my creativity. And I'm really excited to bring it back and share it. Okay. The central paradox. The greatest tragedy is also the greatest insight. The strategies that once protected belonging eventually prevent belonging. Silence prevents misunderstanding, but also intimacy. Perfectionism prevents criticism, but also authenticity. Self-sacrifice prevents rejection, but also mutuality. Emotional distance prevents hurt, but also love. Control prevents surprise, but also spontaneity. The same system that once helped someone survive eventually limits how fully they can live. The final message. Shame is not simply an emotion. It is a deeply adaptive system built under conditions where vulnerability felt unsafe. Let me say that again because I bungled that. It is a deeply adaptive system built under conditions where vulnerability felt unsafe. It originally tried to protect against rejection, humiliation, abandonment, or emotional pain by encouraging concealment, constant self-monitoring, and endless self-correction. Those strategies may once have served an important purpose. However, over time, they can become outdated. Ooh, I gotta slow down. However, over time, they can become outdated. All right? The protective system continues operating even when life has changed, causing people to mistake old survival rules for enduring truths about who they are. They may come to believe that they are fundamentally flawed, that love must be earned, that mistakes define identity, or that authenticity is inherently dangerous. The deeper invitation is not to reject shame or pretend it never had a purpose. It is to understand what it has been trying to protect, to examine whether its assumptions still match present reality, and to gradually replace inherited conclusions with more accurate ones. This means recognizing that being hurt does not make someone inherently defective. Being rejected does not determine their worth. Making mistakes does not erase their humanity. Feeling ashamed does not prove they deserve shame. Vulnerability is a necessary part of genuine connection. Self-compassion strengthens accountability rather than weakening it. Authentic belonging comes from being known, not from performing perfection. Ultimately, shame asks people to become smaller in order to stay safe. The deeper truth is that lasting safety does not come from becoming smaller, more perfect, or more hidden. It comes from integrating every part of yourself, the strengths, limitations, wounds, aspirations, fear, courage, and recognizing that no single failure, painful history, or protective adaptation has the authority to define the whole person. You are not what you have been through. You can put these protective survival adaptations down if you want to, babies. Wholeness is not the absence of imperfection. It is the willingness to live honestly, remain open to connection, and allow identity to be shaped by reality rather than by fear. All right, I am going to end it there, babies. That's all I've got for part 1. I will be back later this week with parts 2 and 3. Feel free to tune into those if this resonates with you. If not, that's perfectly fine. Understands that content will still be available if or when you change your mind. All right, take care of yourselves, beautiful beings. Until next time, bye.